Good morning, guys. Hope everyone's doing good today. Today's video is covering a question that I've had from more than one person, and it is, what do you need to hair trick? Well, that's a really broad question with a lot of different answers. I've seen cars that have a really good, efficient built enclosure with a fair amount of power. They could hair trick pretty decent. And it all depends on the hair too. If you get a girl with really thick, heavy hair, it wouldn't hair trick. The thinner hair, it'll hair trick. But just a good basis, I would say, if you're doing a no-wall car, not a trunk car, a no-wall car, like a hatchback, probably 215s and an enclosure that is built to handle some power, which that would play into the design, because you'd want a good amount of power, and the right porting. You can't just throw a huge port in there and expect you to get a lot of port velocity to pull off hair tricks, but that's the route I would go. And like my wife's car, it'll hair trick sometimes, but I didn't really build the car for hair trick. I was kind of focusing on SPL score and just loud. Now, if I redid the enclosure, it would hair trick really easy, and that's her little daily driver. But that car was doing consistent 154, so it's not bad for a car that has all sunroof, Ford Edge, huge sunroof. You know, I mean, I was impressed with the numbers out of that car. But this opens up a whole nother door for things a lot of you people that don't have big systems don't really factor in. And this is what happens a lot. Guys get some good subs or mediocre subs, either or, and then they're like, I need an amplifier. So they'll look online and they'll be like, oh, I can get this 8,000 watt, you know, Sundown SFB or Tar Amps MD series, or, you know, whatever. We're talking amps that do 8,000, you know. And they stick it in their car, and they might have a run of 1/0 from the front battery to the back. May or may not have a back battery, and they turn it on, and within a couple hours they blow the amp, and then they're mad at the amp company. This happens all the time. That's why everybody was saying for the longest time, like, oh, Tar Amps, they'll catch your car on fire. No, it was the idiots that thought they could run an 8K on a piece of 4-gauge wire from front to back with no back battery, or one back battery, you know, that was a regular old lead acid that shouldn't have been inside the cabin of the car anyway. And this happens far too often. I've seen stuff on these Facebook groups. They have like bad grounds and bad connections at a fuse holder where the fuse holder is melting, and they're wondering why. But the rest of this story is, a lot of people don't even realize to run a lot of power, you need electrical. And, you know, you're going to wind up spending $400 on wiring at a bare minimum if you buy good OFC wiring. And I done a video, you can get by with CCA wiring, but you got to use more of it than OFC, you know. Like I said, there is really, one's as good as the other if you do the math for your amperage and do overkill of each. But we're not going to get into that. That was another video. But, you know, you got $400 or $500 in wiring at the bare minimum. You have $400 in another alternator. You'll probably need a bracket to run 2 alternators. So you got to add that into the equation. That's like $250, $300 more for some cars. And then a good amount of battery power in the back. You know, if you're getting a big C-Max, you're $1,500 to $2,000. Yin long, you're still at that 1,500 mark if you get enough yin long. So the thing is, a lot of people don't bring all this into the equation, that they are going to spend a couple thousand just on electrical. And then the amplifiers, you know, you can go cheap on amplifiers, or you can go good amplifiers, it's all a toss-up. And cheap don't necessarily just mean full bridge amps, because there's a company, Power US, they have full bridge amps that are as good as any other amp on the market. So it all comes down to what you want to run, but always plan that you're going to spend a shit ton of money. As I was sitting here figuring up the other day, my wife's Blazer build, I probably got 15 grand in that thing. And I just started that build earlier this year, and it's not quite done yet. But when I started her build, I built hers right out the gate. When I built the Jeep, I mean, I built this out of cheap pine plywood, and it's still kicking. And I don't plan on upgrading it anytime soon, but it was cheap pine. I did really crappy doors. I did CCA wiring. I didn't have a good alternator out the rip, you know. I had an eBay higher output than what I had alternator. I just kind of built everything on a budget, and I built it kind of quick in the beginning. And with the wife's Blazer, I have built it better with better equipment. Like, I started this thing, I had American-based XFLs in here. And God, them things sounded so good. This enclosure sounded phenomenal with them XFLs. But they were cheap subs, and they only lasted me, I think, 7 months. So, you know, it is what it is. But can you take cheap equipment? You definitely could. I was hair tricking with the XFLs. And, you know, I would recommend, if you're wanting to build a vehicle to hair trick, get you some decent equipment from the start. A really good box design, build a good enclosure, tune it low. I'm talking tune that bad boy around 28 hertz. 28 hertz, that way your peak should be in the low 30s, maybe mid 30s at the highest, and that's your perfect hair tricking range. But yeah, it can be done, and I mean, it can be done on kind of a budget, but I would still recommend getting decent stuff to start with. But I would do it with 215s. That would be the easiest. I mean, you could do it with 412s or 312s, but 215s are just good all around. And you other guys planning on doing a big system, God, advice I can give you is start buying stuff and just holding on to it. When I first built this, I started buying equipment and stuff almost a year before I started my build. I'd just buy stuff, it would come in the mail, and I'd sit in the bedroom. I saved to buy the majority of this in the beginning. I didn't like buy everything off the rip at one time like I do now. Now I just blow stupid money for no reason. But also I get hookups a lot of times now, and it makes it far easier. But until you get to that point, you know, you just kind of, you have to buy a little bit here and there, unless you balling. If you balling, you golden. But anyway, that kind of covers it. A lot of people just never realized what it takes to build something like this. You know, the wiring cost, the battery cost, the alternator cost, the equipment cost, the wood cost. I built my wife's Blazer in the, like, right when the wood prices skyrocketed. And mind you, I got a deal on the wood because I knew somebody had a shit ton of it. And I think I still wound up spending almost $500 on wood to build her car. So, I mean, think about that. You know, it's not cheap. I mean, I probably had $200 in PL3X. Because you use it for everything, you know. You use like 5 tubes to put the first board on the roof. You use 3 tubes to put a board down to the floor of the car. And then all the joints and everywhere else you use it. So, God, you can spend some fucking cash. I mean, you can spend some cash. God, I've probably edited that out, but I'm not going to. But anyway, guys, that's today's video. It's a question I've had, and a lot of people have asked me that question. I have seen cars with like 112 and a good box hair tricking. I've seen builds at 418s that can't hair trick. And they should have been able to, but they had a really poor design enclosure. So that really plays a big factor in it. Anyway, everybody, I hope y'all have a great day. Peace out. And as always, bass on.